Hi everyone, I'm here today with Aaron Eden from Moves the Needle over in Arizona, Tucson. So we're going to talk today a little bit about Intuit. Intuit is a software company in the US. They're now 30 years old and they've taken a big chunk out of Microsoft's market share for the financial and small business finance market. So we're going to talk to Aaron, who has been playing a role in helping establish corporate entrepreneurship within Intuit, and see if we can get some tips and advice from Aaron. So Aaron, thank you for joining us on the call today.
Thanks for having me.
Can you give us a bit of an introduction to yourself and what you're working on with Moves the Needle, etc.?
Sure. Yeah. So what I'm working on currently is a company called Moves the Needle, which is we help employees inside the enterprise to behave more like entrepreneurs. And my work there is really based on a lot of my experiences with what Jan was talking about a minute ago with regard to applying these principles inside of Intuit. Excuse me. Previously, I was an Intuit employee for about 14 years, off and on. I've always been an entrepreneur, so constantly dabbling in other things while still employed at Intuit. And about 4 years ago, maybe it's 5 now, but I actually became an innovation catalyst for Intuit, which basically meant that I was responsible for helping other employees apply things like design thinking, lean startup, customer development, these other innovation tools. 10% of my job was to help other employees apply those principles in their daily work. So that showed up as like running different workshops, doing hands-on coaching, doing training sessions, whatever was necessary to help other employees to apply these types of methodologies in their daily work. So that move into being an innovation catalyst, while it was only part of my job, it completely ignited my career. So for me personally, I went from doing data warehousing and business intelligence and engineering type work in the data warehousing space into product management, HR, university recruiting, leadership development. I moved into all of these other areas, which as an engineer, why would HR want to hire an engineer to do university recruiting when they have zero experience in that area? Well, it had to do with all of these innovation skills. They were looking for somebody that could come in and look at things differently and help the entire team to do things differently and get better results as a outcome. So
Aaron, let's zoom in on that. So obviously your career evolved. It was becoming more and more entrepreneurial, I guess. But why was HR then interested in these newfound innovation skills? What was the turning point for Intuit to say, we want to adopt more corporate entrepreneurship? We're already established company. We're successful. We're 30 years old. What was the tipping point for that?
Probably about 7 to 8 years ago. Intuit's about 30 years old, like you said, and probably about 8 years ago, we were starting to see what is actually typical of many different companies, where the company has grown to a very large size and has gotten out of that startup phase and is definitely a large enterprise, no doubt about it, right? And so our founder Scott Cook, he's consistently involved with Intuit to this day. He's sort of the innovation figurehead, I guess, for Intuit. He has no need to stay involved, but he does because he's passionate about it. And so he noticed that that we had lost some of our our innovation mojo, right? That like early on we behaved like a startup, and he was noticing that was sliding away, and that we weren't focusing on customers as much as we used to. We weren't looking to solve important problems for those customers. We weren't coming up with creative new solutions, and so at that point in time, there was a handful of people inside the company that were applying these design thinking principles and were really passionate about it. And they were seeing signs that these folks were getting really good results and were still behaving that way that they had hoped the rest of the company would behave as well. And I wasn't around for all of it, so I can't give the exact details of how it all kind of came about. But basically, at that point, the Intuit Innovation Catalyst program was born, and there was a handful of maybe 4 or 5 people that started teaching these design thinking principles to others. And the way they set it up was that it was an invitation-only group that you could be a part of. So if they saw that you were already behaving differently or applying these types of principles in your work in some way, maybe you didn't know it, or maybe you were dabbling with it, or whatever the case may be, then an innovation catalyst would nominate somebody else to become an innovation catalyst also. And once they had enough people nominated, they would go through and train a group of new ones, and then those would be responsible for driving that in their areas. And so it was a very much like a grassroots level growth of the Innovation Catalyst program. So the way I became an Innovation Catalyst was I was learning about these principles from a podcast from a gentleman by the name of Phil McKinney, who was the CIO for HP. And so on his podcast, he taught about a lot of these techniques. And so I started experimenting using these with my business intelligence team at that point in time. And coincidentally, or accidentally, ended up running a brainstorming session for one of the directors and her teams. And I had no idea, but it turned out she was an innovation catalyst. And so she saw what I did and said, "Oh, wow, you'd make a great innovation catalyst. I'm going to nominate you." And so that's how it actually came about. So, the Innovation Catalyst program was really the driving force inside Intuit for how we went from behaving like a big enterprise to now, 8 years later, being labeled as the 30-year startup, or the 30-year-old startup. I mean,
before I go into the program a bit more, I want to backtrack a little bit, because you mentioned that the founder realized you were losing your innovation mojo. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can define a little bit more for the other companies out there that are maybe not so innovative right now. How would you recognize that you're losing your innovation mojo? Because a lot of companies are really under threat today in the marketplace, mm-hmm. and like the publishing industry, it's very obvious. But what are the telltale signals you can be looking for within the company to recognize, hey, you're maybe not applying some of the techniques that you could be in order to stay innovative and stay in front?
Yeah, I think so. One of the key things that Intuit looks at is a score called Net Promoter Score, which is how likely your customers are to tell their friends and family about their experience with your product. It's a pretty well-known and pervasive system many companies use, and so I believe that we were seeing some drops in those Net Promoter Scores. Also seeing that competitors had products in the market that were better than the ones we had. Also seeing employees that were working completely in silos, not looking to work outside of their normal boundaries. Seeing folks not necessarily being willing to drive change and challenge the status quo, those types of things.
So the Innovation Catalyst program was formed, and people in that program were then able to nominate other people to come in. Was this the program that you then relied on, or did this evolve into other programs?
Yeah, so there was definitely the Innovation Catalyst program was a big piece of it, but Intuit also, some point in time in there, I think it was probably about 5 years ago, also launched a program called Unstructured Time, which basically allowed employees to use 10% of their time to hopefully drive new innovations in their area. But they called it unstructured time, in that literally employees could use it for personal development time. They could use it to go learn some new skill or those types of things as well. So it wasn't, it didn't have to be directly related to innovation. It was just, hey, here's this amount of time for you to make yourself and or Intuit better. So that program worked really well. And then after kind of early on in the Innovation Catalyst journey, there were a few Innovation Catalysts that started doing what we called jams, which was like an idea jam, which was just like a day dedicated to bringing a bunch of people together from different parts of the company and brainstorming on a specific challenge or specific problem, trying to come up with creative solutions to that, or like a pain jam, which was completely interacting with customers to try to understand customer pain points, right? So these types of event-based things that helped bring employees out of their daily work and into working on some more innovative type things. And then
I like the idea of the pain jam and bringing in customers to help solve those problems.
Yeah, it sparked all kinds of incredible things. The other thing that popped up as a result of it, we had a couple of our rotational development employees. So rotational development meaning that they were just out of college, and they were they do a 2-year program where they work in 4 different parts of the company, 6 months each. And so it gives them a really diverse experience of the company before they end up figuring out where they want to work. So these are very high potential folks just out of college. And a couple of them took it on themselves. They said, well, we've got all of these people generate tons of ideas inside the company. We should have a way to track that and share that across all of our employees. And so 2 guys took it on themselves to go and build this new tool called Brainstorm inside the company, that then started kind of taking off on its own, right? And that was a direct result of unstructured time. And so then at one point, Brainstorm actually became a product that we were selling to other enterprises, and the rotational development employees that had originally created it ended up going and working on it full time as their own product inside the company. So it's another good example of intrapreneurship.
Right, and then you actually turned it into a revenue stream because you were selling it to external customers.
Yep, exactly. So, and there are lots of products that Intuit has in market that came from unstructured time teams. SnapTax is actually a story that's in the Lean Startup book at the beginning of it. SnapTax is a perfect example of that. One of the teams actually came to one of those idea jams, and they created a video that showed somebody taking their phone, snapping a picture of their W-2, and then having their taxes filed automatically. And the leadership team saw that during the final pitches for the idea jam. They're like, "Oh my God, you guys built that in like 2 days during this idea jam. That's incredible. We want to make sure we fund that further." And the team's like, "Oh, wait, hang on. That's just a video that shows what we might be able to do. It's actually not functional. But yes, invest in it." And so they ended up, spinning that up as a separate product, which actually is quite successful today. That, for me personally, that was my first Lean Startup experience, because I was actually part of that team. I was providing all of their data and analytics as they were going through this process of launching this mobile app. And the honest truth is, at the beginning, that team drove me nuts because they're hitting me with different reporting requirements. Like every 2 days, they're like, "Oh, we need this thing, and I'm like, "What are you guys doing? I can't like pull all the data warehousing together and give you reports in business objects and all this kind of stuff in like 2 days. Like that's like a 4-week project, and you just changed it from yesterday." And so it actually pushed me to do things differently, and I ended up creating a reusable system where basically they could just push in any data they wanted in a specific format, and then they could actually self-serve and build some of their own reports. So it ended up that platform ended up taking off for many of our new products. They could use that really quickly, and it would help them to get reporting and analytics out of their brand new platform without having to wait for the IT team to spin up 6 weeks of work. So
Right.
anyway, so I sort of went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think what happened was a couple key programs started to spark other things, and when you empower the employees to be able to make those types of changes, individual employees start seeing opportunities, and other innovation type programs popped up as a result of those things. So the series of lean startup workshops that I drove through the company over the last few years, I trained about 1,200 Intuit employees on how to apply lean startup principles inside the company. And that is another example of that. I used my unstructured time with, I shouldn't say it was Ben Blank and I inside Intuit, used our unstructured time to come up with this idea around teaching lean startup principles in sort of a hackathon type format. And so we asked the employees that came to that event to save up their unstructured time. We're like, hey, save up your unstructured time for a month, and I'll give you 2 full days of unstructured time, and you can come to our hackathon, and we'll teach you how to apply these principles. And it took off like wildfire, and we end up, training those 1,200 employees, in just a few years' time, getting a leadership award from the CEO and many other, it drove millions and millions of dollars for Intuit, as well as boosted the engagement scores of the employees. So many of these big companies, they'll measure on an annual basis how happy are our employees, are they getting what they need, and all these types of things. And we actually found that the employees that went through our workshops were happier than the employees that didn't, by a significant number. So we actually, drove revenue, drove new products, and ensured that we had happier employees. So it covered all three of the key stakeholders for Intuit: customer, employee, and shareholder.
Wow. Quite impactful. But I want to summarize.
And fun.
And fun, right? Well, employees became happier, so they were having fun, the company was earning more money, and customers were getting better products. Mm-hmm. But it all started by someone, or the CEO and the founder together, agreeing to allow 10% time. Right? That was the new initiative that allowed people to explore ideas they were having, and then that allowed you to create this grassroots approach of providing different programs, and people could then opt into those programs. So would you say, because this is very much a culture thing, I think as more and more programs are being rolled out, you're able to have an impact on the culture, but the fact that employees were granted 10% time in the first place is maybe not common. I know 3M did it, 15% time, Google were doing it. Does it have to work that way around, that unstructured time is granted from the top level before you can take advantage of all of these innovation capabilities?
No, I actually get that question a lot from many different companies. They look at that and they go, "Oh my God, really? We're going to have to give away 10% of our time to our employees to be able to make this work?" I think it definitely helped and had a positive impact. But I think that the same things would have been possible without it. They just probably would have taken a lot longer. And so, as an example, if Intuit didn't have unstructured time when I was launching these lean starting events inside Intuit, if we hadn't had unstructured time, I was passionate enough about it that I probably would have scheduled the event over the weekend and would have come and done it on my own time, or I would have asked my boss, "Hey, can I take a couple sick days? I'm going to go work on this thing," or whatever. But like the employees that think this way and that behave like entrepreneurs already are very likely to break some of the rules in order to make this happen. And I think that's actually one of the key pieces of innovation, which is knowing which rules to follow and which rules to break and when to break them, right? If you're going to do something that's beneficial to the company, I think it's totally reasonable to go break some rules. Obviously, you're not going to go, get yourself fired over it, but I think that from a grassroots perspective, as an employee or as an individual that's passionate about doing something different in your company, going in and actually taking that on and making some small baby steps, right? So the very first event that Ben and I ran with these lean startup principles, we blasted out an email to a bunch of people and basically said, hey, we're having this lean startup workshop. Come and join us for 2 days, right? We didn't have a workshop at that point in time. We didn't have anything. We had an idea. Ben and I had coached a bunch of teams at like Startup Weekend and these kinds of things. So we had a good sense of what we would do if a bunch of people said yes. But we went and checked to see, are there other people inside the company that also think like us that we can kind of gain some momentum with. And so I think as an individual, it's looking for, well, what is something I can go do right now that will generate some data that then I can take that data back to my boss and say, look, I made a positive impact. Will you give me a little more time to work on it some more, right? You're not going in and asking for $1 million investment. What Ben and I did was we ran one event with 5 teams. It looked like it went pretty well. People had a good time. Some of them actually generated some good ideas, and it looked like some promising possible new businesses for Intuit. We said, that worked pretty well. We did that in the San Diego office, which is not as big as the headquarters in Mountain View. So we said, well, let's try doing another one. Let's do it in the headquarters. So we scheduled another one. The second one, we had 12 teams sign up to be a part of it. And I emailed the CEO before the event and said, hey, we're doing this event. Will you come and be a judge on the second day? And he said, yeah, talk to my admin. If my calendar's available, I'll be happy to be there. Turned out he was available. So he came as a judge, which added a whole lot of fun and pressure for the teams that were participating. And we said, wow, that seemed to work really well too. And teams actually generated some good results from that one. Now we should ask for some money. And so at that point, Ben came up with the crazy idea that we do what we called the Lean Startup World Tour, where we would go and we would launch 100 startups inside Intuit in 100 days. So we'd go to 10 different Intuit locations, and at each location we'd train 10 teams, and that would get us do that once a week, and that would get us to 100 startups in 100 days. And in order to do that, we had a bunch of travel costs that needed to be covered for the two of us, and so we asked for $50,000 to go do 100 startups in 100 days, based on the data from those first 2 events. And the leadership team said, yeah, we'll take that risk. It sounds like you guys are making a good impact, right? And so we ended up coming pretty close to that goal. We were able to get 82 startups in 100 days. And then actually we did a huge event for our one of our technology organizations, 300 people simultaneously across 7 different locations, but that didn't count. It wasn't in the 100 days. It was right after the 100 days. Couldn't get it scheduling wise. It didn't work, but so we definitely outdid that 100 startups, but it wasn't quite in the 100 days. But and that's really where that impact that I talked about before, the shareholder, employee, and customer impact. That's really where that came through, was that big push of 100 startups in 100 days. But we never would have gotten to that point had we not gone and taken those baby steps at the beginning, generated some data to actually put in front of people and say, no, it's not my opinion that this thing will work. I actually have some data that shows that it is working. It's light and it's early, but it's enough to where a multi-billion-dollar company is okay investing $50,000 or $100,000 in a small program like this.
Essentially, you are applying Lean Startup to applying Lean Startup.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yep.
So 100 startups in 100 days. Can you quantify a little bit what was the outcome? I mean, I have a story on my website that says 100 teams have been trained at Intuit, and over 8 months, they actually managed to generate $20 million worth of new revenue to the company. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
It actually was significantly more than that. Can't give the exact figure, but let's see. So 20 million is what, eight digits of revenue. So it was really close to 9. So
okay.
One of the one of the biggest wins. I'm trying to be careful about the actual numbers that I share because I know that that's not public information, so don't want to get anybody in trouble, including myself. The but 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 yes, it was significant and it was measurable. And one of the biggest wins that happened was actually a really simple change. A lot of people, they look for like, oh, I need this big disruptive innovation and that kind of stuff, and those things are important, but they definitely take a lot longer to manifest. One of our biggest wins was actually one of the sales team on the QuickBooks Enterprise side. So QuickBooks has got a desktop product, which is roughly $300 to purchase this product. We also have an enterprise version that's meant for more medium-sized businesses, more complex businesses, that kind of stuff. Has some advanced features, and it's typically used where you need multiple users in there doing things inside of QuickBooks. And so it's sold in a 5-user pack. So you buy a 5-user pack for I think somewhere in the neighborhood of like $3,000. And so this team had the idea that we should stop selling in a 5-user pack and we should sell individual licenses to QuickBooks Enterprise. This was a sales team, and they had been this idea had kind of floated around the company for many years, probably since we started doing 5-user packs. The idea had floated around that we should sell single user licenses, but there's this fear that oh, we've got customers that have 10 licenses, but they probably only need 7, and if we do individual licensing, they'll downgrade, right? These types of worries that we're going to lose a lot of revenue as a result of it. So this team went during one of the 2-day workshops, went and ran a couple experiments where they, even though the systems couldn't support it, they offered users a single user license. And what they did was, if a customer said yes that they would buy that, they would actually just discount they'd give them a 5-user pack and they just discount it down to the cost that they thought it was going to be for a 1-user pack. So the customer was happy because they thought they were just going to get 1 license and they got 5, and we learned very quickly whether this was going to work or not. Some of the big surprises that the teams latched onto during those couple days was, number one, there were actually quite a few users that were sitting at a 5-user level that needed to go up to like 7 or 8, and weren't upgrading because they didn't want to pay for 10 because they didn't need it. So there were quite a few that actually went the other direction that needed to go up, and there were less that needed to go down. The other really surprising thing was that, remember I mentioned that price difference between the QuickBooks desktop version that was at $300 and the enterprise version that's at like $3,000. Well, when you go down to a single user license, now that jump is like $300 to $1,000. So customers that were on the professional version were more likely to now upgrade to the enterprise version because they could get the single user license. So they could upgrade for features, not just for the number of users. And so that ended up driving a significant amount of revenue for the business, like somewhere in the ballpark of like 15% growth or somewhere around in that area, growth for that business area, right? So like, what business leader isn't going to jump on a 15% boost in their sales from a small cross-functional team going and running a handful of experiments, right? So all of those, from a financial perspective, it was things like that, as well as new products that were being launched that really drove the numbers. And then I already talked about the employee happiness, and of course, the customer happiness. All of these experiments are designed to help boost those net promoter scores for customers, and so we were seeing that with quite a few products as well.
So it sounds like the example you just gave, you actually admitted this wasn't a new idea. This idea had been around since the invention of licenses. So what is changing now? Is it because we figured out a way to let employees, or let them plus enable them to experiment and gain data to base decisions on, rather than basing decisions on someone's gut feeling? I read something the other day, highest person's paid opinion.
Hippo.
The Hippo, right?
The Hippo Principle, yep. And that's what happens if nobody has data. That's who wins, right?
Right, the person that is most senior is their gut feeling, it's their opinion, they make a decision, but it's not based on
Yep.
data. So
Correct.
by enabling employees to use lean startup and customer development methods, essentially we are getting data to base decisions on, which can lead
Correct.
then to these types of results.
Exactly. Exactly right. And that's why my point earlier about even if you don't have unstructured time or you don't have a senior level mandate on how to on the fact that you should be working this way, you can start applying these principles and then generate some data to then get a little bit more room to continue forward. So yes, eventually you do want to have a top level buy-in, but you may not have that to start with, and you've got to give them some reason to want to move forward. And if it's just opinions, Hippo's going to win.
Right. And so really it's just enabling one or two employees to train them up, skill them up in these methodologies, and let them go and apply it by themselves, and then they'll be able to get that data and win more people over.
Yeah. I'd say the in a perfect world, the magic number is between 2 and 4. 2 to 4 employees that are very cross-functional, almost similar to what you'd see for a startup team. So I love Steve Blank's hacker, hustler, designer, visionary archetypes that he talked about in a blog post a while back. So this, when I say cross-functional team, it doesn't necessarily mean they work from different departments or different silos or whatever. It actually means that they can represent that hacker, hustler, designer, visionary paradigm.
Right. I did want to circle back on that because you were talking a lot about teams, and I wanted, obviously Intuit is heavily a software company. What do we look for in those teams? Can we bring employees together from all different departments, or should they be from the same department? What's more important, where they're currently working, or this hacker, hustler, designer, visionary characteristics that they may have in their personality?
I think once the team has an idea that they're passionate about and ready to run with, that's when you want to have this cross-functional team. And I'd say that which department they're in doesn't really matter as much. I should say that actually it does matter, but the reason that it matters is because you want to make sure that you've got that diversity. So depending on the innovation you're trying to bring market, you want to make sure that the employees have the right capabilities to be able to do that, right? So if you have this idea for this killer new mobile app that you're going to bring, you better have somebody on the team that can do mobile development, right? Early on, they're probably not going to be writing a lot of code, but later as the team moves forward and finds successful, learns some things from the customers and finds that they actually should be building a mobile app, then they're going to need those skills on the team, right? And so if somebody with mobile app development skills doesn't exist in your department, then you're going to need to get somebody from outside the department. So I'd say that's where it matters. Earlier on, when the team is actually doing more of the brainstorming and more of the customer empathy work and trying to understand what is the solution that they might bring to market, in those early very fuzzy phases, the diversity of the team is even more important. And so in that case, I would say bringing people from cross departments is huge for being able to generate creative ideas. And then when you get to the actual search process where you're creating sort of a startup team to try and figure out what's the business model around this idea, that's the point where you want to leverage the hacker, hustler, designer, visionary.
Right. I'm really glad to hear that from you, Aaron, because that's exactly the approach the Academy has been taken. We've kind of split up the training now into 3 stages. The first stage is bringing very diverse individuals together for disruptive ideation. Then training key individuals in how to gain evidence that these ideas are actually good ideas and have potential in the marketplace. So that could be 1, 2, 3 people from different departments. And then I think it's the incubation stage when you decide to invest in this idea that you need to pull that team together that has the right skill set so you can go into prototyping and actually building something.
Yep, exactly. Yeah,
cool.
It's interesting too because when you think about a large enterprise, finding a really cross-functional team of 4 people that behave like entrepreneurs I think depending on the culture of your company, that may not be a big deal, or it might be almost impossible, right? So big companies are built to execute, and so typically employees that execute really well don't search very well, don't apply these principles very well. And so initially, I think when you're getting started inside a company, what you're looking for is how can I quickly identify that handful of people, right? What are some things I can do to get those people to raise their hands and say, yes, yes, I'm excited about this, right? And it's very likely they're going to be across many different departments. So I think you know, you might get lucky and have quite a few that are close by, but definitely your first goal is figure out what allies I have inside the company that we might pull together to generate this first set of data.
Right, and that ties back to the point you made before about being able to nominate other people to be involved in the program.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
All right, I think we should move to a close.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of good tips here. We've also covered some of the key challenges that people face. Let's talk very quickly about what advice you would give someone or the organization as a whole if they now think they want to get started with exploring more disruptive and innovative ideas.
Yeah, so I think we hit on it a little bit, right? Which is identifying who that first team is, going and picking a project and trying to generate some data to show that that applying these principles actually has a positive impact for your company, right? But
what if you don't know how to do that yet?
Yeah, so there's lots and lots of resources around being able to learn those principles. So if you're a book person, there's lots of books available. If you're more of a teach me type person, there's things like the Academy for Entrepreneurship. There's things like some of the Moves the Needle workshops, right? You can also hire a coach from different places. So I think there's a lot of ways to get started. The fact of the matter is that this isn't rocket science. It's just a little bit of a different way of working, right? And so I think the key thing is get comfortable enough that you can start practicing, right? There's likely somebody already in your company that's doing it, so find them and work together with them, and get some help where that's appropriate. But the flip side that I'd throw in there too is that I've talked about this a lot from the perspective of the employees, or from like a frontline type person that may want to do this. But I think for a leader, for somebody who's a manager or a manager of managers, in those types of situations, one thing with getting started that I would caution you to watch out for is that oftentimes folks get excited about new tools like these, and they either directly or indirectly mandate that people start trying these things out. And so as a leader, I would caution you to not go in and try to tell other folks that they need to try this out, but use more of a facilitative leadership position. Lead from the back, or lead from the back if you've got folks that are already excited about it, and lead by example if you don't have anybody that's excited about it. So start finding ways that as a manager that you can apply these principles in your daily work, and others will take notice of that and start latching onto that, and then you can start getting the team excited about it. But if you just mandate that somebody needs to go learn this thing, it's very unlikely that it's going to take hold, and if it does, it probably won't last long.
Right, I like that approach. So maybe on a very high level, what sort of companies or what sort of industries do you see now that are really turning to these processes? Because it's not just software, right?
Yeah, no, definitely not. It's way more diverse than that. Let's see. I'm working with an injection molding company that makes injection molding machinery. Working with doing some work with one of the largest, most notable companies in the world that's already sort of been touted as a lean startup practitioner. They build everything from light bulbs to microwaves to jet engines to all kinds of other stuff. Working with, let's see, a company that probably has put the stuffing in your pillows. Working with a company that sells and manufactures paper products. Working with sales consultants. Working with medical device companies. This is, yeah, it's becoming quite pervasive. I'd say that that any company where they've got startups coming along to come and try to eat their lunch is finding opportunities to apply this. I think the natural tendency is to think about applying lean startup principles just for new product development. And the fact of the matter is that it's based on lean manufacturing principles, which are all about reducing waste inside your enterprise. And so any enterprise that has waste, whether it's in their functional teams or whether it's in their product teams, has an opportunity to apply these principles and benefit from them.
Right.
And so that's why people are like, oh, this would never work with the cure for cancer. But the truth is that there's actually, in the business model of curing cancer, there is a lot in that business model that needs to be discovered besides just the solution, which is the cure for cancer. Right now, that's the biggest risk, is figuring that out. But the business model around it needs to be tested just like any other. And so there are definitely areas where these principles can be applied in that case as well.
All right, great. Aaron, thank you so much. You've given us very good
insight. Thanks for having me.
And I'm glad to hear that, any company almost, as long as they're saying, hey, I want to improve efficiency or figure things out faster, then it sounds like these concepts really apply.
Definitely.
All
Good
right.
luck with the Academy. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Take care.
All right, talk to you soon.